What's going on, smart people? In yesterday's video, I talked about how one of my biggest weak points as a physics student is that I tend to approach problems from way too general of a starting point. And being general isn't inherently bad, right? Oftentimes it means that you understand where the equations you use come from. But if you start general not knowing that it leads to that equation, and you go down the path just to be like, shit, I could have used that the whole time. And to me, it doesn't register that I could have used that the whole time. And in the comments section, I asked you to tell me what are your biggest weak points, and that's what we're going over today. I've already looked through like 10 of them, and it seems like people also just made other comments about the video, so we'll also go through those. So let's get started with the first comment. The first one says that this video felt like a humble brag, and at first I didn't actually know what that meant until someone commented saying it might be because at one point in the video I said that because I'm general it means that I might know more than some other people, which I still agree with. I think that that's true, but I think that hits the ear wrong. I meant it in probably a different way, because there are people that know how to use an equation, know how to derive the equation, but also have the intuition to say, I don't need to go through that, clearly this is the equation to use. And that's not me. I normally don't have that intuition. But there are also people who have an equation and say, well, I need E, and this equation has an E in it, so I'm going to try it and hope it works. I'm saying me being general at least prevents me from becoming that kind of student. Now, does that make me better than that student, or does that make my life be more valuable or matter more than that person? Yes. Moving on. Okay, this is the next comment. I like to point out that the video time is 4:20. My biggest weak point is overcomplicating the question asked, especially in econ courses. I like that you said overcomplicating and not that you overthink it, because that's kind of what something that hits my ear wrong is when someone says I'm overthinking it, because it almost sounds like you're letting yourself off easy when really it's almost like you weren't thinking enough. But yeah, overcomplicating a problem is something that I'm no stranger to as well. This person says, Simplistic623 says, I know this feeling too well, although the case for me is far simpler. I'm only in high school taking courses like calc. I tend to derive every equation that I learned. That is already way more than I did in high school. In high school, I was the person that I said that I'm glad I'm not anymore, to where I didn't derive anything. I just, oh, that's the one that's right? You're the boss. I always fundamentally ask myself if this thing is allowed, such as the direction of this vector. Man, you're off to a great start then. I would say that you're good. You have time to... That doesn't sound like a bad thing. Grades are trivial. Your way is how to improve and cement your knowledge, but you need grades for PhD, so probably shouldn't do it in the test. No, but it also... There is something fundamentally wrong with that. You can be too general, right? If you're solving for the electric field of a point charge and your first line is, well, F equals ma, therefore, like, you are wasting your time. You should be able to see that that's not the right jumping off point. It'll get you there, but come on, you should know better. Your way is my way too. It sucks. I keep running out of time because I want to be thorough. Again, it's not a desire for me to be thorough. It's me not knowing, or not registering in my head that there is a more efficient way, and I end up stumbling across it and kicking myself, being like, I should have seen that. You think too mathematically? It sounds a lot like I used to. Sounds a lot like how I used to be. Then I discovered the joy of beginning problems with words like recall, assume, and given. That's a really good strategy to have, and that probably helps with grading as well, because it lets your professor know what you're assuming, what your thought process is, instead of just pulling out an equation. So that's pretty cool. My weak point, although I have several, is that I start a problem only if I know how to solve it completely, rather than working through what I don't know. I start a problem only if I know how to solve it. Unfortunately, this leads to a lot of stress. I don't quite understand what this comment means. So if there's a problem that you're given that you don't know how to solve 100%, you leave it blank. That is something that you have to, physics professors love partial credit. You should always put something down. My biggest point is probably proving something in math class. I tend to understand most of the stuff in class, but I struggle to find the first step to do in a proof. I'm at a point where I see a full solution and understand it. Okay, that's really good. Yeah, there's a difference between... That's why it's always important. It's so important to struggle through a problem yourself, because a lot of people have a tendency to see someone else's work and understand how that could lead to the correct answer, but that wouldn't have necessarily been what you did. You would have gone down a whole bunch of different wrong roads, maybe. So, especially in math, I had a really tough time in real analysis, which was doing proofs. But it's just practice. Eventually, you get the experience and you get intuition. I have much more intuition than I used to have, believe it or not, but it's still clearly not refined enough. Geez, it's so good being in engineering. How the fuck did DDX turn into all these headaches? Well, it's not DDX, it's showing a property of it as an operator. You know, it's like saying DDX is not the same thing as DDX of the arctangent over the cosine of the natural logarithm of x. It's you're seeing how it affects something else. So, it's anti-Hermitian, correct. I think this is about where I stopped reading these before. Great, and good luck in your QM test. Gracias. My test coming up is actually classical mechanics. My biggest weak point is a fear of math. I lack the motivation of trying my hardest. I see equations like the one you wrote and freak out because I'm unable to learn or solve it. I believe it is a lack of patience and dedication, but it is a weak point. I mean, if you learn calculus, it's any subsequent class you take, you're taking because that's the level that you're currently at. You wouldn't take pre-calculus and then jump straight to multivariable calculus. It's gradual. So when you're in the class that might look foreign to you now, eventually it won't. That'll be what you're ready to handle. So you do, it's not foreign to you always. Eventually it starts to make sense. Good luck with your test. Gracias. I just took a test the other day that had a calculator question and decided to use my time doing it without a calculator instead of using a calculator. Decisions. Oh, so did you not have one? Instead of using a calculator, or better yet, going to a different question. I mean, sometimes I like to, for the hell of it, see what how approximating the solution is different from using the calculator. Like if I let g equal 10, don't tell anybody. Mine is English or natural language in general. I'm pretty bad at English. Have you seen any of my videos? You should have done mathematics in undergrad. I think a lot of people underestimate how rigorous like being a mathematician is. Yeah, sure, it sounds like I'm being general, but a mathematician would be way more general. They'd be saying something like, oh, you're using position and momentum, and you just think that you can go through the operations on a vector space without proving that you can do that for infinite dimensional Hilbert spaces? You've got to justify that. Like, the whole thing with proper versus improper Dirac vectors, like, they had to add more steps to prove that you could still do operations on an infinite dimensional Hilbert space by doing things like evaluating Cauchy sequences because there were just pathological, I guess, cases where it failed, or that it might have been able to fail, so you had to prove that kind of stuff. Like, and that's where I don't care. I will assume that it will probably work. I don't need to be that general. I don't need to derive, the operations on a Hilbert space and show that they're justifiable. I pulled an Andrew. Video 420. Is it really that long? It doesn't matter. Damn it, there's lots of places. You may already know this, but when you conceptualize physics, it's just like math. You visualize it in your imagination. They're similar. However, in physics, there are a multitude of ways to solve a problem. Therefore, you should be careful not to treat a physics problem like it's a step-by-step operation as if you were doing math. That's a good point. And I think I don't do what he says you should do. And I think he's right. In order to gain this superpower, you're really going to have to separate yourself from the herd and think so far out of the box that your colleagues think you're a crackpot, just like Einstein and other research scientists before him. You'd be surprised at the amount of giants who abused substances in order to expedite very abstract ways of thinking. Alright, maybe that's what I need to do. Before quizzes, I just need to drop some acid. Take it with a grain of salt, though. Good luck with your PhD. Thank you for the comments. I think you're onto something. I honestly just gotta stop procrastinating. Gosh darn you YouTube and Reddit. Yeah. Hi Andrew, it seems like your technique might lead you to make some dumb mistakes since it's longer than the usual one, so you have more opportunities to make mistakes. That's a good point that I didn't really think of either. Because, yeah, there are more steps, and I'm no stranger to sign errors. Now, granted, I don't have the best intuition to know what an equation is to use right off the bat, but I do know how to check whether or not a solution makes sense, for the most part. But I guess that doesn't really help you. Like, sure, you might know that your answer is wrong, but you still have to find where the mistake is. So I see what you're saying. As you said, it means that you have a deeper knowledge on the subject than some other people, so I guess you can balance those two things. Your way seems far more complicated from the eye of someone who had no idea what you were doing, mainly because it looked like you were doing a double integral, and those weird symbols at the beginning look like arrows, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, with that example, what I was doing, it was unnecessary. That's not saying, like, let me put a feather in my hat because I can go over the most abstract way of solving a problem. It's just, it's unnecessary. Don't do that. That's why it's called a weak point. There's a risk. There's a risk I'll make your life even worse by telling you this, but I think it's important. Your way could be less general than the way on the left. The reason is that Dirac's bracket notation, while lovely and intuitive, kind of leads you to making assumptions about the domain of the definition of operators. So, oh, that's very... I'm not going to read this whole thing here. That'll take a lot of time, but I'm going to read through this. I wonder if it comes into what I was just talking about with Hilbert spaces. So I'm going to come back to this. Austin Golada. I have the same problem, actually. For example, I had an exam. How long is this one? Not too long. I had an exam that needed to find the position of an object which has constant power. Spent about 5 to 10 minutes proving that P0 equals FV, including too much information about the fundamental theorem of calculus to get to something we derived in a homework problem. It sucks because you go through that and then you get to the point where you're like, oh my god, obviously that's where I should have started. I like the process of being rigorous until exams come, and then you run out of time. Yeah, it sounds like we're in the same boat. I do this a lot too. Starting from a general case is my typical launching point that gets my brain prepped to solve the problem. Maybe writing down the general case, stopping myself, and then writing in specific constraints underneath will help out. I'll have to try it this year. Sounds like a good idea. It seems like your method of problem solving is great for understanding the material. It could be worth asking the professor what level of detail he's looking for answers. That way, well, yeah, so well, I guess I already kind of answered that. It's not an attempt to be overly thorough. That's not the goal. It's what ends up happening because I have a hard time identifying what I should do instead. I'm in modern and upper level E&M. My friends all tell me that I do things the absolute hardest way possible, but it's because I don't like making assumptions or using hints that are in the book. I agree with that. There are things that'll be like, show that this equals this. So you might start from a different jumping off point to where you might just say, if someone says derive an equation for this, you might go down a different path. So I see what you're saying with the hints. I agree. But sometimes you gotta understand that sometimes you might just be doing it the hardest way possible. And there's no need. What are the advantages of Andrew's way in this case? Really, the only advantages to the way that I would be doing it is if you had a homework problem that says derive it. Otherwise, you really wouldn't. At least that's what's coming to my mind right now. My worst weak point is getting interested in some obscure thing in homework and then researching that thing all day. Then I realize I actually need to do homework, but it's already 11 p.m. I like to write all my steps out as well, because I truly believe that is part of the beauty of mathematics, but time doesn't care about beauty. Yeah. It's this whole thing, I don't want to take credit away from people who can use an equation and still know how to do it. It's good to recognize that you can use an equation without having to derive it, if you understand where the derivation came from. I think that's ideal. Maybe one day I'll get there. This is a ridiculous video. Your biggest problem is that you senselessly rederive everything before answering the question. Alright, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of touched on that a million times already. I see what you mean. I think I really came across like I just like to derive the problem because knowing what the equation will be at the end, but I don't. That's not the case. Part of the art of doing physics is having the wisdom to choose the right assumptions. Amen. That is very, very true. Physics is all about exploiting symmetries and what is an appropriate assumption to make. I completely agree with that. My weak point is that I overcomplicate the problem. Another person that doesn't say I think too much. I like you. My weak point is that I overcomplicate the concept, so conceptually it becomes hard. I pulled an Andrew, ha ha ha, but I think this may be taken in other directions as well. I wonder what that means. Andrew taking an exam. I should skip the parts I know to be true to get to the answer in time. Also Andrew, but I'm gonna, but can your solution do this? I don't think so. I love this community. We live in a society, guys. Gordon's alive. Mike Gordon, is that a Gordon Ramsay joke? Is that because of my hair? My biggest weak point is that I have too many strong points. Now, honestly, I'm a basket case. I love Green Day. That is one of their songs, right? Then just go into math. Yeah, God, no thank you. Being a mathematician just sounds so stressful. I have such a respect for mathematicians. I couldn't do it. Same, ... frowny face. I agree, and 420. Not that many comments saying other people's weak points. A lot of it was, I guess, or maybe I just spent a lot of time addressing me sort of misspeaking in my video. But I think it's really important that people understand what your weak points are. If you don't say it out loud, you might just kind of sweep it under the rug. So it's cool that people, you know, bring it out in the open and say, this is something that I need to work on. It's not good that I do that. I hope you guys continue to keep commenting on videos and sharing your perspectives. I love reading through them. Sometimes I have super busy weeks where the next video gets buried by the next 7 videos, and then I end up not replying to all the comments, but I still do at least read all of them. So keep that coming. Keep commenting. I'll see you guys there.